note is clicked in the list. Bonus credit, and again, these are just 4 things to do. The breakdown between bonus and not bonus is pretty dang arbitrary in this one. I'm not even sure which of these things would be the hardest, but it's probably one of the first 2. Add a note to the list when the form is submitted. Make the delete button work, and make the plus button in the sidebar clear out the form so a new note can be added. So in the code pin React Rebats on Monday, you did some event-related stuff, right? Using what's called controlled inputs. There's a link on yesterday's notes to some posts in the documentation about the difference between controlled and uncontrolled. We're not going to mess with uncontrolled inputs in this class. So it's something you can look up if you want to know how it's done. Should you encounter it in the wild, see it in some code, don't know what it is. It's a thing, but we're not going to do that. We're going to let React control our components all the time. So among the tricky pieces to all of these homework problems is, where exactly the state lives, how you get data from one place to another, how you change data in one place from an event that occurs somewhere else, etc. So by the end of yesterday, we had put state on the app component. And we need to read those notes from the note list. So we had to pass them down as props, because the only way to get data from one component to another is through props. The only way for, But there's a component in between those two, right? There's main in between. So we had to pass it to main and then pass it to note list. We want something to happen when we click one of those notes in the list. To do that, we really need to already have the form wired up to something in some state somewhere. Did anybody get what was listed first working? Load data in the form when a note is clicked in the list. Cool. What about add a note to the list when the form is submitted? Okay, cool. So how did you tie the form to the data of a particular note? Where did was that note a prop that you passed in? Was it state on the note form? Where did you put it? Where did you put that note data? Any of you had your hands raised. And there weren't many of you, so looking down and escaping means there's a pretty good chance, 1 in 3, that I'm going to just call on you randomly. So volunteer. Yeah, Jake. Okay, so that state was in the form component, the note form component, or okay, in the app you added current note to state. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay, and then pass that down as a prop, and that's where the form got its data. Do it differently. Same thing. Porter, same thing. So what did you do? Okay. Did something, but you're not sure quite what. Okay. Well, we'll start with what Jake said. So we have state on app that has a list of notes, and we also want the current note, the note that's currently being edited, basically. I already added my comma after this notes object in state, so I will set the initial state of, we'll call it this.state.currentNote. To something with, a blank ID, blank title, blank body, ID null, title empty string, body empty string, something like that. We want to pass that down all the way to the note form component. In between the two, there is main. So to get it from here to there, that's what we're going to have to do. Here we go. Here's main. We're passing down one prop already, and that is notes, the list of all of them. And let's just add current note, which is what, Ben? Gosh darn right. Good. So main is going to get that out of props, right? And pass it from there down to the note form component. So we can call it current note again. Just the name we choose for the prop. And that would be props.currentNote now. So down in note form, which is a class, so the props don't come through as an argument because the whole component isn't a function, it's a class. So they're going to be found under this .props, right? It's going to be a property of the component as opposed to an argument. So how do we get that stuff to show up in the form? What'd you do there, Porter? Mm-hmm. So now in this, what? Okay, what does it do? You can add one though? Okay, well you got to do something kind of similar to do that. Okay. Jake, what'd you do?
I just have the value of the text area set to this.props.currentNote.body, and then the title input has a value of this.props.currentNote.title.
Okay, so the input that has the title has the usual type, name, placeholder. Add a value. The value won't be a string, it'll be something in curly braces, right? Some JavaScript. And it'll be, it's coming in as a prop, right? Which in a class is accessible through this .props. Which prop? The prop that we passed in was called current note. So this .props.currentNote, and the current note has a title. And the text area you said? But same thing, right? Okay. So in HTML, you determine the text of a text area not with a value attribute, but by putting it in between the opening and closing tags. Text areas have content. But in React, if you want the text area's value to be controlled by React, which we do, you use a value prop, just like you do on an input. Value equals this.props.currentNote.body. Cool. So, having done that, doing a couple of the pieces of homework, loading data when the list is clicked, and making the plus button in the sidebar clear out the form. Those both seem very approachable now. So, Ben, what'd you do to make load it in the form when a node is clicked in the list?
I made a function in app called change form note, and then that just makes a new state and switches all the title, the body, and the end, and sets the state.
Okay, so because this lives on app's state, app is the only component that can touch it, right? So we need a method that's going to do that here. So let's create a new method. And by the way, I don't know if it's been pointed out yet or not, but keep render the last method in your components. That's not, it won't break if you don't, but everyone will look for it there. So do that thing. Set current note, something like that. Is that the idea? That's what it does. And I suppose it receives a note as an argument. Is that what you did? So we learned you do not do this dot state dot current note and set that equal to something. That has unpredictable results. Instead, we want to make a, well, if we were just changing the thing, changing the current note to have different values in it, versus like replacing it with a different note, we might do this a little differently. We already have the new note, so we could probably just go straight to, what do we use instead of setting this dot state dot whatever?
Make a temp state and then just set the state as the temp state after changing the values of the temp state.
Okay, so make a copy of the state, change the values there, and then call this dot set state, right? So do I need a temp state? If it isn't a change, I'm not really changing these values. I want to set current note to a different one. So I've kind of already got the new state maybe. It might be worth, depending on how we're going to do this, it might be worth at least making a copy of this note because as you'll recall, these things are passed around by reference all the time. Objects in JavaScript are always passed around by reference. When you assign them, it doesn't make a copy. It makes a pointer, basically. And when you pass them as arguments to another function, they are by reference every time. You change what you think is a copy, you change the original. And that was actually a desirable side effect when we were doing Michael Baywatch, right? Because it meant that we didn't actually have to mess with the array directly a lot. If we just changed the name of something, it changed in the array too. Die in the array, die in real life. Well, let's not overthink that too much just yet. So what if we said set state, and you pass that an object, and we said current note colon note. So here's one question about that. Is that going to blow away this dot state dot notes because I didn't include that in here? No. Since we're not assigning, we're using set state. The way set state works is any keys that are not included, it just doesn't touch. You're not replacing the entire state object with this thing. You're just passing in the properties on state that you want to change with what you want to change them to. Yeah.
What if you enter like a new key that doesn't already exist in the state? Will it then wipe or will it just add that key to it?
I'm not sure because I've never done it because you're supposed to set initial state. But if you pass in a key that is not already on state, that wasn't set in initial state, if I just make up, yeah, I don't actually know what happens. I'm curious to find out though. Let's do it. I want to do it. Yeah. Okay. Never mind. Yeah. Did you eat breakfast today, Brendan? Did you eat breakfast, Roy? Who ate breakfast? So Lynn, what'd you have for breakfast? Twamwiches. I knew you had grit. So, hey, let's test this out. It's time to learn some tricks.
I'm going to go on record and say I think it will have the key.
Okay, I suspect so, but I'm curious. However you were using that state, though, if you didn't set it initially, I don't know. I don't. It does,
So you were trying to access the property.
yeah. All right. In your developer tools, hopefully you all did this weeks ago. You installed the React dev tools. They're really cool. They may be way the heck down the list in your dev tools. If so, go ahead and drag them right next to console because we're going to be using them a lot. I will certainly be using them a lot, and I hope you will catch on to the idea that you should also be using them a lot because they really help with troubleshooting. They make React so much easier to troubleshoot than vanilla JavaScript sometimes is. So if I open up React, the React DevTools, notice what I have here are my components, not the DOM. The DOM nodes are in there, but I see all my components. And just like on the Elements tab, when you do inspect a specific element, that element's assigned to $0. Look at this, $R. So now my app component is $R. And on the right here, I see all my props in state for this component. I have current note, which is this blank one, and I have notes, which has these two notes in it. Because I have $R here, I can also call methods from here, which is pretty sweet. So in my console, I'm going to make a new variable called new note, whatever. I'm going to give it an ID of the string 4, I guess. Why not? I don't remember what our IDs were, whatever. 4. Title from the console. Body. Yo. And then $R, let's just confirm $R is in fact app, which is cool. So I think I can call $R dot set current note, pass it this new note. Look at that, form updated. If we pop back over to our React DevTools and look at state, we see breakfast, twamwiches. It's there, it adds the key. I don't suppose we really want that there. I had a twamwich myself this morning. So the fact that we can do that means, again, it's actually pretty easy to test these functions in isolation. We don't have to have the event part hooked up yet to see whether that function basically works. It did. It updated the form when we passed in a note. Didn't matter where the note came from. But we want the note to come from here, right? So let's wire up that next part. Well, first of all, which component do I need to go to make something happen when I click this? Did you say something? Yeah. So note list. Yes. That was basically going to be the next words out of my mouth. I'm going to open up note list, look at it, and say, aha, it's the actual note that I'm clicking on, right? So inside note, we already put a little click handler, console logs clicky click. But we don't want it to console log clicky click anymore. We want it to do something a little more worthwhile. What do we want it to do? Well, and this is clicking these things, right? So we don't want to add a new note, right? We want to We do want it to put it in the form, but that's too imperative, really. We want to set the current note. It's up to the form to take care of the fact that whatever the current note is, that's what I'm displaying in the form. But the note component doesn't need to know that that happens. All it needs to worry about is I'm going to set the current note, and whatever happens will happen. It will wash its hands of the whole affair. So we want to set the current note. But dang, set current note is way up here in app. How the heck are we going to get it down there? How the heck do we get anything from one component to another? We do it using... Who said props first? Okay, thanks. Jake the Snake. Thank you, sir. Yep, props. So main is the only other component we're calling from here, and it stands between us and the component we're actually interested in. So, Nikolai, what do I do? What do I do? Caleb.
Can you set a property that passes like the function tag?
You're gosh darn right we can. Why not? We pass callbacks around. We pass functions as arguments to other functions, so why couldn't we pass one as a prop? We can. So it's set current note here, and we'll call it that, set current note. I wouldn't call this a trick question, but it's a question that you have to at least think about. What is it that I put here now? How do I refer to that method? It's the one right here. Yeah, it is this dot set current note. No parens, right? Just like when we pass a callback, we're not the ones calling this method. We're just passing it as an argument to something else, right? Effectively. By passing it as a prop from one component to another. So that takes us to main. And we need set current note to get from main all the way down to note. And we have note list still in between here and there. Oh boy, yes, I'm excited too. So note list needs another prop. Set current note. And how do I refer to that now? Jake, you're not allowed to answer. Props. Dot set current note. Thank you, Rick. Make sense? All those props arrive through this props argument. So down in note list, we render the note component. We're passing down key and a note currently. I'm going to go ahead and put some line breaks in here. We're up to 3 props. Wait, current, yeah. So what's the prop I'm passing down? Set current note, right? The method. I think I'm gonna move the key to the top. Set current note equal what? Props dot set current note. Finally, we're down in note.js. So console logging clicky click or clicky clicky isn't terribly useful. What do I write instead? Nikolai, is that you? So props.set current note, we have that now, but it does, as you said, receive a note as its argument. Say again? Props.note. Yep. Right? So we already have the note. It was passed in. That's the one that's being clicked on. Does it work? Let's find out. I mean, of course it's not going to work, but the question is, what error are we going to get? Because we did all that right. Clicky, clicky. Oh, explode! Okay, error message. We should freak out. Just raise our hand, get some help, not even read the error message, right? No, we should read the error message and see if it basically tells us how to fix it. Uncaught type error. This dot set state is not a function. That makes me think. Yeah.
You're referencing the wrong this. You need a dot bind.
So, seeing that this dot set state is not a function when I think it should be makes me think that this isn't what I expect it to be. So what is it? Because we already tested handle click or set current note outside of an event situation, right? Or not an event situation. Console.log this. Let's find out. Click. Something with a note, something with set current note. Okay, so that's the note that was passed. No, that's that note. What the heck is this anyway?
Isn't it the note that you clicked because it's the one that sent that event?
So in note, we didn't actually make set current note the event handler. Handle click is the event handler, right? And then we just called this from there. When you go back to how setting this works, when you call it as a method, and when you say something dot that method name, you're calling it as a method. This gets set to the object that you called it on. Not the object where you wrote it necessarily, the object that you called it on, the thing before the dot where you called it, which is props. So this is the darn props from note, which doesn't make any sense. That is not useful. But that's how that would work. So as your illustrious friend Todd said, we need to bind it. The question is where to do that. Because we could do it one of several places. We could, when passing it down as a prop, say bind this right here. Let's see. Yay. It works. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it that you see a lot in React is in the constructor, say this dot set current note equals this dot set current note dot bind this. So bind returns a new function. A version of that function that has the binding. And we just reassigned this dot set current note to the new function that has the binding in place. So then when we pass it around, the binding goes with it. That's pretty common. You see that a lot. And that keeps you from having to do it everywhere. Like if we were passing it as a prop to more than one function, or if we were, to more than one component, or if, say, we had more than one event that would need to call it or something like that. This would bind it for all time and we wouldn't have to worry about it. Yeah?
What if you then had a case where you didn't want it binded? What would you do?
You can unbind it. If you think you're going to have to, then maybe don't do it this way. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. But if you think you're not going to want this binding, just don't do it this way.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to override it that way. It would be that always until you specifically intend it.
Yeah. There's one more way. All of these ways are good to know. There's a pretty darn new language feature. It's not even part of ES6. It's not even part of the hot off the presses ES 2017. But it will be in a future version of JavaScript. And that is using something called a property initializer. You know what? Let's make this work and commit it first. Which way do we want to do it? Do we want to bind it down here, or do we want to bind it in the constructor? All right. Let's put that back. Make sure it still works. It does. Yay, part 1 of the homework done. Right? So let's commit. Load data in the form when a node is clicked in the list.